I'm excited about a number of things. I'm really excited about this coming Saturday evening. We're doing our next, we call it Seek First to Understand. And Seek First to Understand is where we go into and examine an issue from a Christian perspective in the culture that's going on so that we don't look like total idiots and we actually understand what's going on. And this week, on this Saturday, I'm going to be doing an interview with a man, a brilliant young man, who is identifies as same-sex attracted and as a highly committed, devout Christian. And I'll be doing that interview. It's going to be live cast. We're not going to have an audience because it's just weird to have an audience all the time. So we'll be doing that, frankly, from my office. We'll be live casting on 2 or 3 different forums so you guys can watch it live or pick it up a little bit later. But I'm excited. If you have questions, they'll tell you during the announcements how to get questions to us that we can ask. But I think this is going to help people understand issues a lot better, and that's what we're trying to do. Because we live in a weird culture where it's, have you noticed it's kind of hard to figure out how to be a Christian where you are now? You ever notice that? Just say yeah, because really the sermon depends on you saying yes. Okay. Thankfully, nobody said no because we had to leave and been done right there. Well, that's nothing new and different. Throughout the history of the church, throughout the history of Christianity, we've struggled with how exactly do you live out your faith, and in all kinds of different ways. The early church, the brand new church, had a problem right off the bat, had problems right off the bat, and one of them was, how do you do this Christian thing? Because it was kind of like, I don't know, it's like Jesus spends his entire ministry, he ministers for about 3 years, right, before he's crucified and rises and returns to heaven. He ministers about 3 years, and he spends almost all his time with a dozen people. He brings in a dozen guys, he hangs with them, travels around with them. There's a little bit of an extended circle, but it's not very many people. He spends his entire 3 years primarily teaching and pouring into these 12 people. And the church has its very first service just a few weeks later, and a few thousand people become Christians. I'm sure they're all going, Jesus, you didn't really give us instructions on what to do with thousands of people. You told us you modeled for us how to handle 12. Okay, there's thousands. And everywhere they went, it happened again. They get another 1,000 people. They'd have a church service, 1,000 people come forward. It was like just crazy. And they're going, how do we do that? How do we, you told us to go into all the world and make disciples, people who are followers of you, people who act like you, live like you, become like you. And the only way we know to do that is when you were working with 12 and I've got 7,000. And we're supposed to also, by the way, figure out how to help people live like Christians before they've invented the word Christian. It was a challenge. And you see in the first part of Acts, they're trying to figure it out. And it comes to a head in Acts chapter 6. You can turn on the Bible, QR code, what are you going to do to get there? In Acts 6, it kind of comes to a head. How do we do this? How do the 10, 12 of us who've been intensely trained, how do we handle thousands? And in Acts 6, they've got a problem. It says in verse 1, but as the believers rapidly multiplied, there were rumblings of discontent. You get people together, you're going to get rumblings of discontent. It's how it works. The Greek-speaking believers complained about the Hebrew-speaking believers, saying that their widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. In other words, there are lots and lots of widows. There's no way for a widow to really make a living in that culture. You were dependent on your family. A lot of them didn't have families. So the church early on took care of all of its widows. And the church split neatly into 2 groups. There were those who naturally spoke Greek and those who naturally spoke Hebrew. These were all Hebrew Jewish people. These were a lot of Gentiles, or former Gentiles. And it seemed like the Gentiles were getting discriminated against. And they come to the key guys, the key handful of people. And they say, you guys got to fix this. You've got to fix this. There is no way, we cannot survive without this. And I want you to understand, this is crucial. This is one of the most important decisions the church ever made. Because if they blow this one, the church splits into a Jewish church and a Gentile church and probably, or maybe not have even survived. It definitely wouldn't have thrived. This is crucial. And so the handful of people who are the key leaders get together and they pray about it and they talk about it. And this is If you don't know this one, this is going to blow you away. So the 12, the key leader guys, called a meeting of all the believers. They said, we apostles should spend our time teaching the Word of God, not running a food program. Now, I don't think that sounds almost negative the way they phrase that. I think that's a iffy translation. I think this is important, but we're called to do this. And so, brothers, select 7 men who are well respected and are full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will give them this responsibility. Then we apostles can spend our time in prayer and teaching the Word. And everyone liked this idea, which freaks me out that everyone liked this idea. Because here's what they said. If we're going to take everything the church needs to do to make disciples, every piece of it, everything we have to, there's lots and lots of stuff that goes into that. There's loving people, caring for people. There's all this stuff. Here's everything. We're going to make a big pie chart of everything that the church has to do. Or maybe a Venn diagram. Everything. And the 12, the key leader said, we're going to do this. We're going to teach, we're going to pray, and we're going to lead. They didn't actually say lead, but what are they doing? They're leading. We're going to teach, and we're going to pray, and we're going to lead. And we're going to leave absolutely everything else to everybody else. That's what they said. And that's what they did. They handed everything off to the rest of the church. Now, did it work? Are you here? Yeah, it worked. See, that's incredibly crazy. Because, my wife's not in this service, so I can say this. We have 3 types of shows that we watch at our house. They're the shows that we both like together, and there are a handful of those. There are the shows that Kim likes and I tolerate, because I'm a snob. So I sit there on my laptop and I do something else while I because I can multitask, I keep up with the show and we have conversations, and it's fun. And there are shows I have to leave the room for, or she makes sure I'm not home for, that kind of show. And she's got a new one. Don't tell her this, okay? What's it called? New Amsterdam. It's a hospital show. You and Kim can watch that together. Because I'm a person who works in leadership. That's what I do, right? One of my biggest jobs is leadership. And you've got a guy who's appointed to be the head of this huge hospital in New York. So how does he lead this hospital? By cleaning out bedpans. By stopping, he completely quits leading and goes down in and he's treating patients and he's doing all. And I'm like, you can't run a large hospital by treating patients. You can't ever do that. It looks good. It makes you sound good and people get all excited because look at this wonderful leader. He's down here doing all this stuff. But if he treats patients, who's making the big decisions? If somebody actually did what he did, the hospital would be bankrupt in about a week and a half. Because the disciples show that. All the stuff that's there, okay, what can we do best, and what is best if we let everybody else do it? I mean, if I'm the head of a hospital, I'm trusting that my cancer doctor knows more about cancer than I do. That my pediatricians know more about children's medicine than I do. And they have time to invest. Anyway, so that's what the disciples said. We're going to do this. That's what we're going to do. Okay? And how do you do that? Do you just forget about this part here? You just hope it happens? Well, that's not really leadership either, is it? Just say, well, we're going to do this, and you guys figure the rest of it out. What they did was they doubled down on the strategy they'd had from the beginning. In Acts 2, it gives us that strategy. It says every day they continue to meet, talking about all the church, they continue to meet together in the temple courts. Big group. They get together in a big group at the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they broke down to their homes, and ate together with glad, sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Okay, we've got 2 things going on. We've got this big teaching session at the temple. Okay, and the 12 teach that. These are the guys that show up and do the big teaching at the temple. But then we send everybody home, and they meet day to day in individual houses. In, what'd you call those? Small groups, home groups, cell groups, connection groups. What they said was, we're going to focus on these things. We're going to let you guys, we're going to break you into groups according to your gifts and your talents and your passions, and we'll do this and you do this. We'll provide direction, you do the ministry. Now, wonder how it worked. Well, according to the next verse, the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. So this is something that Sometimes it's hard for people to get this, but churches increase their impact as they become larger and smaller at the same time. Rick Warren wrote that. I just copied it from him. He's a pastor in California. Churches increase their impact as they become larger and smaller at the same time. As we do the temple court, as we get together in a big group and we work to grow this group, and then we break this group into small groups, into connection groups. I'm going to tell you why that works in just a second. But connection groups, small groups, are our number one strategy to carry out the Great Commission. It's our number one strategy to carry out the Great Commission. It's what we do in connection. Because the Great Commission is what? Make disciples. If you're not good at Christianese, disciples means people who are followers of Christ, who are committed followers of Christ. And the purpose of the church is to make disciples. And let me give you a secret. It's almost impossible to do that in this room. Make a really true, committed disciple in this room. I can get you started. I can get you fed once a week. There are things I can do. But making individual, committed disciples in this room is really, really challenging, almost impossible. But why does it work to break it down? Well, in Ephesians 4, it tells us that one. Paul was writing to the church in Ephesus, which is a church that met in a big group as the church of Ephesus, and then broke into small little churches all over the place. Then they're talking about getting blown away, not understanding, people getting confused, people failing. And he says, then, though, we will no longer be little children. If we start getting together, learning the true gospel, tossed by the waves and blown around by every wind of teaching, by human cunning with cleverness and the techniques of deceit. So people are teaching them all kinds of fake stuff, and they're running after it. But they say, but speaking the truth in love, let us grow in every way into him who is the head, Christ. Okay, next. From him the whole body, fitted and knit together by every supporting ligament, promotes the growth of the body for building up itself in love by the proper working of each individual part. See, one of the most important things I know about Steve is Steve can do 3 or 4 things really well. I can. Which leaves how many things that I don't do very well? Thousands and thousands and thousands of things that I'm just not any good at. And I can fake it till I make it, and a few of those, and a few of them I can't even fake it till I make it. And that's true of you too. You've got 2 or 3 things that you are really, really good at, really, really passionate about, you're really, really talented in. You know what my job is? Turn you loose. Turn you loose. My job is to equip the saints for the work of ministry, to get you able to do all the things you can do, because there's so many things you can do better than I can do. I know those of you who know me well are going, no duh, Steve. Now, I'm going to say some things. I'm going to try not to make these offensive. And I'll probably succeed because I'm trying hard, unless you just want to be offended. You know what the difference between a big church and a small church is? How much the pastor and the staff do. I know small churches, and most of the people in America choose to go to small churches. There's nothing wrong with that. But what happens, what keeps a church small, is the pastor does everything. I know pastor friends who mow the grass. Like there's nobody else that can pull that off. I know churches where the pastor does the speaking on Sunday morning and his wife runs the children's ministry. Not because she's gifted necessarily in that, because they can't get anybody else to do it. And as long as a church does that, as long as they say the person who can do everything best is the dude who stands up front, they're going to be small because there's only so much I can do. There's only so much Barry can do. There's only so much the staff can do. There's only so much the key leaders can do. Some Sunday, next Sunday, I want you to come to church, and I want you to start in that end, and I want to work your way this way, and I want to count how many people you see working in this church. Either greeting you, taking care of your, just the ones you bump into along the way, and see how many of them we pay to do it. It's next to none, isn't it? You know, you might run into Kristen in the children's area. You might not. She's pretty busy. She's actually in service this time because we want her in service too, because she trains her leaders to do the work of the ministry. Does that make sense? I know this is strange stuff because if you watch New Amsterdam, you think the purpose of the ball is to come down. But it works so much better. Because the biblical model, according to Acts, is that the pastors devote themselves to what? Remember the list? Prayer, teaching, and leadership. Which, by the way, are three of the things that I know how to do. I'm working on prayer. I teach okay. And I have some ability to help people understand what they should do and help them get to it. Okay? Now, next question. What's that look like? What's it look like? I'm going to spend the rest of our time just on what that looks like. We're going to spend the rest of our time on one verse. One verse, maybe two. Forget now. It's Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. It's all clumped together. I want you to hear this verse. And we're going to go through and we're going to talk about how this verse only works if you break into smaller groups. Okay? Author of Hebrews wrote this. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Now, first thing I noticed about this verse is how many one another stuff there's. Spur, one another. Not giving meeting together, but encouraging one another. All that stuff with that. So I'm just going to take a phrase at a time, and we're going to look at it, okay? You mind if we do that? We're going to just bear down and do some teaching today. Is that all right? I'm not going to run around and yell a whole lot. It's your first time. I spend a fair amount of time running around and yelling, but I'm not going to do it today. Okay? So meeting together. That means developing relationships. Meeting together means developing relationships. And a connection group exists to develop relationships, one of the things. Now, this is one of my more interesting memories of being the pastor here. I was at church one Sunday, which I tend to be, and I saw somebody from my gym, a young woman who goes to the same gym I go to. Yeah, it's a CrossFit gym. For those of you saying, I haven't mentioned CrossFit in a few weeks. Let me go ahead and throw that in there. And so I work out with her pretty frequently, and I see her at church. And the next time I see her at the gym, I'm like, hey, it was great having you in church Sunday. It went well. She goes, yeah, I've been coming for 2 years. Really? She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, I kind of blend in. And she didn't look like she should blend in. She was tall. She was attractive. She's not the kind of woman who just disappears. But so a week or so later, I finally found her. In this room, I found her. She had a tendency, she would sit toward the back, and she'd slump, and she'd sit behind somebody. And it became a game for me to see if I could find her. Okay? But here's the reality. And this is just a reality. There are, 150, 200 people in this room right now. I'll do this again in an hour. There'll be another 150, 200 people in that room. For me to keep track of whether or not you're here on a given week, it's kind of hard. For me to know if you just disappear, almost impossible. For me to know what's going on in your spiritual life, got nothing. Here's the point of that. It's not about me. If the dude who spends 45 minutes looking at you every week can't tell who's here and who's not here on a consistent basis for the most part, what chance do you do of finding out if somebody's here or not here when you're sitting there looking at me for 45 minutes? Or your watch or your phone, whatever. Whatever you're looking at for 45 minutes. Christianity works best in community as you're relating to other people. And you cannot build strong relationships in a group of 100. You can't do it. You just can't. I mean, what do the introverts do? What do you introverts do? I know none of them are going to tell me. Send me an email maybe later with an assumed name, and I'll figure it out there. Nah. Introverts can't make friends in big groups because what do? You go, okay, we got to stand up, got to sit down. Oh gosh, it's the greeting time. AKL, introvert hell. Hey. And then, last song. Can I get to the car without one of those greeters catching me? All right. Not going to raise that. Introverts just won't form relationships in crowds. And here's something for the extroverts. Extroverts can't form relationships in crowds. They think they can. They meet 27 people. Woohoo! That's not a relationship. That's you went to the concert and stood beside them. That's all that is. So you can't form a relationship in a big crowd. So the early church said, tell you what, we'll do the whole temple thing, we'll get the temple, we'll do the big thing, and then I want you guys to go to individual houses where you can learn people's names and their jobs and their kids and their problems and all that stuff. And that can only happen if you break into smaller groups. Okay? Now, next phrase. That's encouraging one another. Encouraging one another. Anybody ever get discouraged? No, nobody here? Okay. Now, I am something of a motivator in the way that I speak. And I can encourage you a little bit. Somebody who knows you can encourage you a lot. And a connection group exists so you can maintain your compassion and your enthusiasm. It's really hard if I were to pick somebody over here and somebody over here and say, how much compassion do you have for what's going on in that person's life? That you go, I got nothing. But a connection group is a place where you can, see, some of you have done connection groups and those of you haven't. And those of you who haven't don't understand the kind of compassion that comes from people who know you well. What's going on in this room right now? Well, I got people that are retiring. I got people that are looking for work. I got people that hate their jobs. I got people that are fighting in their marriage. I got people that got one kid that's just going off the rails. I got people, well, you name it, we got somebody in this room. Okay? If you got 12 people in a room, you got 6 people in a room. It's not somebody in this room is retiring. It's Colleen is retiring. She's in my connection group, so I know that. Okay? It's not somebody's having trouble with their kid. It's Larry's having trouble with with Tina. Right? They're not in my connection group. I wasn't going to do that. Okay? But suddenly you can break, and you can provide that compassion they need. And the enthusiasm. Because that's where, the other thing is, you need somebody that cares for you, and you need somebody that can help you get excited again. Anybody ever run out of enthusiasm? Barry even nodded. Okay? Compassion, enthusiasm. Our connection is going through a book called, let me get it right, How to Be a World-Class Christian. We just started it. And we're going to be pushing each other and challenging each other, encouraging each other. And one of the things it mentioned in the first part of the book is something called compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is because, have you noticed there's a whole lot of stuff wrong out there? Did you ever notice you can't fix all of it? Did you ever decide to just not try it all? It's like, just give up. A group can do that differently. 1 Thessalonians 5:11, Paul said, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you're doing. Which brings us to the next part, because not only are we building each other up and encouraging each other, we're also, I love this, Hebrews says, spur one another on. Spur one another. I love spur. Because I do aggression kind of well. Yeah! Those who know me know that I will do that to you once in a while. Okay? What happens, you lose the challenges. So a connection group provides you with challenges. The two things I always say about a connection group, there's 2 things that happen when you have close friends. Close friends know there's times you need a hug and times you need a kick in the butt. And they know you well enough to know which you need when. You can't do that in a big group, but you can do it in a small group. You can have a thing where there's a challenge that we can face. And one of my favorite things is how well we do lazy. Everybody looks down, not me. Spouse says no. All of us do lazy, because what do? I'm going to tell on some of you guys, and you're not going to like it. Because some of you have potential here, but you found nobody bugs you if you do here. Anybody? 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 When you go to work, man, you shine, you're a star, you kick butt, you take names. You found that if you just show up on Sunday and do the minimum requirement, everybody thinks you're a saint. And they're bragging on you, and you know you're not doing near as much as you could do. But you're getting by, and nobody say anything about it. Everybody's like, oh, that's great, he shows up every week. She's here every time she's on the roster. Every time they do their thing, and you're doing this, and you know you can do this. And you know who can figure that out? This is scary for you. People who know you well. They know you well enough to know, man, that person's a superstar at work. And they just sort of show up at church. Wonder why that is. Because we're naturally lazy. We find the least resistance we can find. And if everybody's just fine with me just doing this minimum thing, then I'll do this minimum thing. Why are you guys getting shorter? You're all getting shorter. You're kind of like ducking. You're going, what? You know, who's he talking about? I have no idea who he's talking about there. I sure wish. Matter of fact, just from our location, just from where we are, I know that most of you are stars at work. Why? Okay. Significant percentage military. The people who don't do nothing still live on base. Right? Because you don't get promoted or you get out in 4 years, you run away as fast as you can. Those who get promoted and work to a certain level can move to the suburbs, which is where we are. I know more than I look like, don't I? And a lot of, can I speak, you military people? You're way up here at work, and you're egad here. You're eking by here. And I'm going, huh. Now, I don't know who you are well enough to know that except for the people in my group, but I can do it from my group. But if you're in a group, I'm warning you, you're going to get around some people, and that can be the group you're working with in children's ministry. It can be the group you're working with in First Impressions. It can be the home group you're learning the Bible with. But I encourage you, by the way, you have my permission. If you're in a connection group with somebody who needs to be a star and they're not being one, you can spur them. You can spur them on. Permission granted. Okay? So you need that, the needed challenges. But honestly, another thing that happens is your life gets like this and you need new adventures. Anybody ever need a new adventure? That's a little different? Your group can help you do that. They can say, hey, yeah, you could do that trip. You could take care of that person. You can do this thing. Okay? And churches give you that new adventure. And then the next phrase in that verse I want to look at is love and good deeds. Spur toward love and good deeds. Not spur toward love and good deeds. That's when we serve outside the group. That's when you go outside the group to serve, is that love and good deeds. A church like ours is like a battleship. I know we don't do Navy very much here, but you know what a battleship is. You've had one sunk on you, right? B-17. You sunk my... A battleship is something that if you bring a battleship to bear, if you take every gun on a battleship and you aim at a problem, you can do damage with a battleship, right? Nobody wants a battleship sitting offshore of their city and just boof, 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 boof. Right? Nobody wants that thing. And once in a while, every year, about a handful of times, our church takes our battleship and we line it up at a problem. You know, there's lots of kids over in one area that aren't getting Christmas. Well, we'll line up our battleship and we will just eliminate that problem. There's a bunch of people in our community who are victims of sex assault and they don't have anything to wear home, and we can come up with enough sweats to fix that problem. Matter of fact, next week there's a food pantry in our community. There's a lot of good work, and they're really in financial trouble. And I'm like, I think we should use our whole battleship on that one. So next week we're going to do a thing for 5 and 2 food pantry, and I'm going to tell you ahead of time. To tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to challenge everybody in this church, every family in this church, to partner with that group and send them $30 a month. Because if everybody in our church starts sending them $30 a month, we'll fix about half their problems. They still got some other financial problems. They had a huge setback. You'll learn about that next week. But we're a battleship. We can line up and we can take down the city. But we only do that a few times a year. There's only a few times a year that's needed. You know what we can also do? Picture a battleship. It's got all these turrets, all these guns, all aimed at one city. What happens if the turrets turn? Every one of your connection groups is a turret. And it can pick a target, and it can do damage. It can help something. You can look around and say, hey, you know what? If our connection group just goes to this one food pantry and helps once a month, we'll do damage. We'll help. If our connection group just goes and serves the poor here, we'll do damage. We'll help. We can clean up a road. We can do these things where we just take one turn. And every connection group has the ability to occasionally pick out its own little target. Don't need a battleship for that target. But 6 to 12 people, you can do something. And every connection group is challenged on a regular basis to find a way to find its own target. Do some damage. Not to, you know what I mean by damage, right? Okay. So what happens is you get together a connection group and you're loving on each other and you're growing and that love bubbles out into the community. It also turns into something else. What do we call this gathering? We call it the welcome home, right? This is where we make it so everybody feels welcome. Do you know some people don't feel welcome in a crowd? You know where they might feel welcome? A kitchen, or a living room, or a dining room. I'm getting so many stories, this is so cool, of people in their connection groups who are inviting that friend of theirs who's struggling, who may be far from God. And they come to the connection group. After they come to the connection group a little bit, they start saying, you know what? You probably could survive Sunday morning now. We've prepared you. And they're coming to Sunday morning. They're starting to serve. They're becoming Christians. They're accepting Christ because they're taking the welcome home into the connection group. Yeah, you're welcome here. I don't think I'd go to church. We can come to here. And then you can tell them anybody can come to this church. So the welcome home works here. And then finally, the last piece in that Hebrews passage, and all the more as you see the day approaching. A connection group can help you sustain urgency. Again, see how awful lot of this is you start to dip, you've got people around you to pick you back up again. You start to dip, anybody here ever dip? Everybody here ever lose their urgency? Yeah. We get tired. We think, I can't do more. You almost can picture a connection group as a place where we go together, we see who's discouraged, and we pick them up. That make sense? Because anybody here ever get discouraged? Oh, yeah, you said you did. And then keep you from slipping, too. Because we all have a tendency to kind of move backward in our faith if we're not careful. And that group helps you with that. Because here's my least favorite thing, one of my least favorite things, maybe my least favorite things about pastoring a church like this one, is that people disappear. They start coming. I start catching their face once in a while. I get to know the face a little bit. And then one Sunday they're not here, and I may or may not even notice that one Sunday, and then 2 Sundays, and then 3 Sundays, and 4 Sundays, and because of the way it's configured, I never learned their name. They're just the person who sat there and smiled. And if it happens in May or June, what do you think I assume? PCS. Oh, they must have PCS'd. That's what it is. And then I'll run into them at Food Line or at Walmart. I'll say, hey, haven't seen you in a while. I have to be very cautious because I don't know their name. I have to put on my, I know your face smile. And where you been? And it's almost invariably the case. The kid was sick one day, and they just didn't make it. And then they went on vacation for a couple weeks and weren't here. And they got back and just didn't feel like getting out of bed. And the next week they were going to come, but that dang kid got sick again. The next thing you know, they've been gone 2 months. And they feel kind of weird coming back. And so they just never came back. Because you know why they didn't come back? I can tell you just between you and us. There was nobody who knew them well enough to know they were missing. There was a big fuss this past week, a good fuss, about the little 3-year-old boy. He's gone for 3 nights. Everybody's freaking out, which is really good. Everybody's out looking for him. You know, there are places where a 3-year-old slips off and nobody notices they're gone. And nobody goes looking. There are people in this room right now who you show up pretty regularly on Sunday, but you've never met anybody else. And you feel yourself growing. You're starting to get this whole Christian thing. It's starting to make sense. You're starting to go, I can see how this could really, really help my life. I can see how Jesus could change me. But you've never met anybody else. You've never done anything to connect. And if you start to slip off, I'm afraid nobody's going to notice. Not because you're a bad person or everybody else is a bad person, because you've never connected. And there are a bunch of you who are stable and you're doing a little bit. You've got enough to keep you engaged. But you're not in a group where you can help somebody like that. You're not ever positioned in such a way that if somebody starts to slip, you can be the one who reaches out a hand and pulls them back. Who, when they're discouraged, you can be the one who encourages them. See, all that can't happen here. It just can't. It has to happen out there. It has to happen in houses. It has to happen in ministries. It has to happen in teams. It has to happen in groups that are small enough that you know who's not there. It has to happen in groups that are small enough that people go, I wonder where she's at this week. I wonder what happened to him. I wonder why he's not been in a group for 3 times. You have to put yourself in that situation. Because here's what happens. Here's what you need. We'll go back over it one more time. Just run down the list. You need to be a place where you can develop relationships. Are you in a place where you're developing relationships? Are you currently in a position where there are people in this church who are getting to know you better and better, good enough so that when you're discouraged, they know you need a hug? And when you're getting lazy, they know you need a kick in the pants. Where you can develop those relations, where you can have that compassion, that enthusiasm. Are you needing that right now? Are you needing somebody to challenge you? Are you going through your Christian life set on what, 4? And you really should be running at 11? To serve outside the group? Are you having no impact outside of church? Outside your house? No impact. You're going, boy, I wish I could do something. You know why you can't? Because you either want to do it with 1,000 people or with just you. And doing something by yourself is terrifying. But if you got 6, 8, 10 people to go along with you, you can do it. Sustain the urgency. Are you still passionate? You watching your faith passion just take a dive? Have I got a cure for you? It's called a connection group. It's a group of people, between 5 and 12, basically. Get together regularly. Do all these things for each other in varying degrees as you grow together and get to know each other better. As you'll learn how to be something for Christ in one of these settings. You make a difference in real lives, including your own. If you're feeling stuck in your faith, can I say either A, you're probably not in a connection group, or B, you've enabled your connection group to where your connection group's now not challenging each other. You're not giving each other permission. You're not loving each other like you should. You're not pushing each other like you can. I'm glad my connection group seems to be going into a really cool phase where we're starting to really challenge each other in ways that I love. Because I'm a big, if you notice, I'm big on challenging people. But I can do all this stuff. I can get isolated. I've got that skill set. I can slip in compassion, enthusiasm. I can not have challenges in my life. I get really dull when I have no challenges. I can get to where I'm not serving outside the group, and I can lose my urgency. And the only way that I can fix that, it's not by listening to me preach. It's by being with people who can help me in that area. So what would be a good invitation today? Oh, yeah. Sign up for a connection group. Get yourself connected with some people who can help you grow into the person God designed you to be. Because God loved the world so much that he sent his son. And his son, after he died on a cross to take away all our sins, said, I want you to go unto all the world, and I want you to make disciples. And they raised their hand and said, Jesus, we don't know how to make disciples. And he left. And they got together afterwards, and there's suddenly thousands of people, and they go, what can we possibly do? The only thing we ever saw Jesus do was gather about a dozen of us. He did teach us how to do it. He just didn't put a label on it. He didn't call it something snazzy like connection groups or small groups or life groups or care groups. He just did it. And he said, I'm going to take you 12 and I'm going to pull you aside and I'm going to pour into you so that when I leave, you can pull about 10, 12 people aside and you can pour into those. And then you train them to pull 10 or 12 people aside and you pour into those and you pull 10. Anybody see how this could work? And Jesus taught us how to do it. And we try other things. We try programs. We try systems. We try big group meetings. We try whatever we can think of. We try books. We try all kinds of stuff. And no. You take, 6 to a dozen people. And you pour into each other, and you grow and you develop until you're ready to find 6 or 12 more people. And you just do it, and you do that, and you do that, and you go into all the world making disciples. And some of you are here because somebody was committed to that. They were committed to making disciples, and they met you, and they said, I got something you might like. And they might have brought you to their connection group first, or they might have brought you to the big room first, whatever works. But you've been hearing it for a little bit now. Can I challenge you today? You might be ready to have a relationship with Christ. If you are, that's what the blue bag is for. At the end of the service, you grab a blue bag off either one of the ends of there or back on the tables. You grab a blue bag, somebody will take about 10 minutes. They'll show you how to have an encounter with God, have a relationship with God. Once you have the relationship, we want to make sure you understand you're part of this big group. So we do baptism. We do baptism the first Wednesday of every month. It's coming up soon. If you've ever been baptized, let us know. We'd be glad to plug you in there. If you want to grow into all that God designed you to be, we have our step classes. Those start up the first Sunday of next month. Again, we do it every month. It's step 1 class. Maybe during this service, if you're a follower of Christ, you want to pray about something, we've got cross over here. You can be a non-follower of Christ and go pray if you want to. We don't check ID. If you want to pray with somebody, we've got some people around the outside of the auditorium. Love to pray with you. You want to take communion, we've got communion stations here in the front, one in the back. But as you can tell, those are not the primary, except for the accepting Christ one, call for today. The primary call for today is, are you connected with people who know you well enough to give you a hug when you need one of those and a kick in the butt when you need that. If you're not, there are people to choose from. There are people here who'd love to have you in their group. There's a group here that you would fit in and watch yourself grow like you've never, ever grown before spiritually. You will make sense of Christianity in a way that you've never done it before. But it happens when you say, the big group isn't enough. It's cool, it's a nice recharge for the week. It's not enough. And you go sign up for one of our groups. And you get in a room with people who are going to love you just the way you are. We're going to get to know you, get to know your kids' names, get to know your issues, get to know your challenges as you share them at a pace that you're comfortable at. And some people that you're going to grow to love like family. A group that can show you compassion and that can spur you on to love and good works. And if you're an introvert, you need that. If you're an extrovert, you need that. If you're any kind of vert, you need that. So today, remember, Christianity was never meant to be a solo sport. Quit trying to make it one.
Would you stand with us?